AI is everywhere now. At work, in schools, on phones, media searches, emails, in images, videos, in stuff that we trust and react to and we make decisions on every day. And for some people, that's exciting. For many, it's not. It's unsettling. Because underneath all that hype, a lot of people are quietly asking questions like, is my job safe? What are my children being exposed to? What's real now? How do I know who to trust and what to trust? Am I behind? How do I fit into all this now? So in this episode, it's not about whether AI is good or bad. It's about what happens when change starts happening faster than people can comfortably make sense of it. Because when that happens, stress tends to rise. For many, it can feel a bit like driving faster than they can read the street signs. At first, it just feels a bit unclear, and then it starts to feel disorienting, and before long, that uncertainty starts becoming stressful because you're no longer sure exactly where you are and where things are heading and how you fit into this unfolding stuff around you. And before we dive into that tricky stuff, here are a couple of things that may help straight away. First, name the real fear. Not just, AI is stressing me out. That's too vague. What exactly is stressing you about it? Are you frightened of being left behind? Worried that you'll no longer matter? Scared you don't understand what you're dealing with and what your kids are dealing with? Scared you can't trust what you're seeing? And frightened that the world's changing faster than you can find some grounded footing in it? Because that fear starts to grow. Secondly, come back to what you can control today. Not totally control and not fantasy control, real control. What new skills can you learn? What can you ask? What can you limit? What boundaries do you need to set? Or, who can you ask for help? Ask yourself this: what is one practical thing that you could do today that would help you feel steadier? Because one of the fastest ways to reduce stress and anxiety is to come back from imagined futures into what's actually in your hands now. Now, keep those two ideas in mind. They matter more than most people think. Now, change is not new, of course. Human beings have always had to deal with and adapt to change. We adapted to the Industrial Revolution, cars, flight, radio, television, computers, the internet. Each one of those changes reshaped how we work, communicate, travel, learn, and live. And I can relate to this in a very personal way. Back in the late 70s, when I was at school overseas, I remember astronauts coming to visit and to speak to us about technology and, of course, what their travels. They talked about things that sounded absurd, almost impossible at the time. They were things like a watch you could use to speak to somebody and see someone, like something we saw on Dick Tracy. Later, when I was at university, I had the opportunity to learn from the late Ron Cobb, a remarkable future-thinking designer who, amongst many other things, helped create the original design of the DeLorean time machine used in Back to the Future and the spaceships for Star Wars. But what stayed with me the most, not just the design work, was the way he thought. He was fascinated by people in stressful situations and how they reacted in crisis. And he would imagine future scenarios that would make people ask, what would I do if that actually happened? And I remember him talking about and sketching out machines that would one day mine resources from other planets. Now, it sounds absurd, science fiction. And yet now, decades later, some of those ideas are not so far-fetched. And that's my point. The future often sounds ridiculous before it becomes normal. But when it starts becoming normal faster than people can emotionally adapt to it and process, this is when anxiety and stress and stuff start to revolve around it and rise. However, here's the critical difference. Most of those changes took years, sometimes even decades. They slowly filtered into the fabric of our lives, workplace, schools. Society had time to adapt and for it to become a part of our social fabric. But then the silicon chip changed the pace. The dawn of personal computing, mobile phones, smartphones, apps, social media, and now AI. And this is where it starts to feel a bit different. Change no longer feels like something approaching from afar. It feels like something here, now, well before we have had time to make sense of the last thing. And that's why so many people feel unsettled. Not because AI exists, but because the pace of change is starting to feel faster than they can adapt to it. And when that happens, as I said, stress and anxiety can follow. And it's affecting more parts of our life all at once. Work, school, parenting, communication, identity, trust, decision-making, creativity, even what you believe to be real. And when change starts touching those parts of life, it's no longer just an idea, it becomes personal. Our nervous system doesn't particularly enjoy uncertainty when it's touching safety, control, relevance, and our identity. That's why I'm seeing this more and more. Some people feel it most around work, wondering whether parts of their job will disappear, whether they're expected to keep up with tools that they still don't understand, whether the value that they've built over years and years is going to count in the same way, and whether they're still relevant now. This is why people are not feeling silly for being unsettled. AI and job security are no longer abstract. For some workers, this is already here. It's touching real lives. AI is not about science fiction. For some, it's about rent, mortgage, school fees, and whether the job they've built their lives around will still exist in a year or two. Parents, and I'm one, are feeling a bit different. What are their children consuming? What and who is shaping them? What looks real but isn't? What ideas are my kids absorbing? Look, teenagers are absorbing AI and they don't even have the maturity yet to distinguish between manipulation, influence, truth, or reality. And it's not just in the workplace. Young people are already turning to AI for conversations, for advice, even emotional support. That raises a serious question. When someone's anxious or overwhelmed, who or what are they actually trusting? Now, older adults feel disoriented by it. Not because they're not capable, but because the world suddenly feels less predictable, less readable, less grounded than it used to be. Then there's the problem of trust. We're entering a world where the person influencing you or selling to you or shaping your child's views about the world may not even be a real person at all. So yes, it does show up differently. But underneath that, the stress pattern is often the same. Too much uncertainty, too little orientation, and not enough sense of where and how I fit into this now. And that latter part matters more than you realise. So let me leave you with this. What makes AI so stressful for many people is not just the technology itself. It's what it stirs up underneath it. Questions about trust, questions about relevance, safety, about how you now fit into this world. Because it's changing quickly. Because underneath those examples, your job, your kid, what's real, what can be trusted, the stresses are often the same. And in the next episode, I want to dive into that one step further. I want to show what uncertainty actually goes on inside the mind and why it can quickly turn stress into anxiety, and why overthinking, scanning, and trying to force clarity out of something that's evolving can actually make it worse, and what genuinely helps. I'll see you in the next one.